Let's bring in Marwan Bishara, who's Al Jazeera's senior political analyst, joins us now from Paris. So, Marwan, first up, Donald Trump talking about Gaza there, but despite the despair and all the images that we've been constantly seeing here on Al Jazeera of the starving and the dead, no news on Israel, no effort on Israel to end all this.
Yes, and, is there starvation in Gaza? Well, it depends what day you ask the American president. Yesterday there wasn't, today they seem there is. Tomorrow, God knows. Clearly, Nick, there's a lot of improvisation in addition to the aggressiveness and hostility in terms of tone from the Trump administration, but that does not add up to a policy. There is no policy. They're leaving it to Netanyahu, a bit of a compliment, a bit of criticism, a bit of indifference, a bit of ambiguity. We don't know. I'm not sure the Israelis know. The Israelis are trying to guess what Trump wants on this. And now I'm wondering if there is some kind of a gap or schism or miscommunication between the State Department and the White House, between what Trump is saying and improvising every other day, as what he hears from European leaders, what he hears from the media, and so on and so forth, and what he's told by some of his most pro-Zionist advisors.
Yeah, well, the State Department have been speaking. We'll come on to that in just a second. But hang on there for a moment, Marwan, because just want to get onto this. Dozens of ministers are gathered at the United Nations working towards a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians. But the US and Israel, they're boycotting the event hosted by France and Saudi Arabia. And the Saudi foreign minister, he spoke on the importance of Trump in ceasefire negotiations. Have a listen to this.
And I am firmly in the belief that U.S. engagement, and especially the engagement of President Trump, can be a catalyst for an end to the immediate crisis in Gaza and potentially a resolution of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the long term. So obviously, we as strong partners of the United States continue to work closely with the U.S. on many issues, and we hope that the U.S. will continue to lead in the efforts for peace. And as I said, we have tremendous respect and faith in President Trump's not just belief and hope in peace, but in his ability to deliver on that hopes.
So back to Marwan in Paris. So Marwan, the Saudis very much keeping the Trump administration on side, but how hopeful is what the Saudis are saying, especially given the US are boycotting this event and in fact saying that they're rejecting a two-state solution conference? This has just come from the State Department in the last few minutes.
Well, the question is, what choice do they have, right? There's almost, a full-fledged declaration of impotency on the part of European powers and Arab regional powers in terms of trying to affect the situation. For 2 years now, or 22 months anyway, the Arab League and the Islamic Conference, we're talking about 1.5 billion people represented there, committed to breaking the siege and delivering aid to Gaza. And what happened? More starvation the past 22 months, more genocide. So really the Saudis and the Egyptians and the Jordanians and others are all, incapable of affecting the situation. I think they're admitting that they are just weak and cannot do anything themselves about what is going on in Gaza. And hence they do what the Arabs have done since 1973, is appease the United States and try to outdo the Israeli appeasement. Because if you remember, just a few days ago, Mr. Netanyahu was promoting President Trump to the Nobel Peace Prize, right? One war criminal telling his master, you deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. So the Saudis and other Arabs are trying to do the same, meaning they're trying to appease the American president or to work with them. Now, the Saudis, should have leverage already with Trump. Remember, the $1 trillion with the Saudi Arabia, more than $1 trillion with the Emirates, hundreds of billion dollars with Qatar. So Gulf nations have some leverage with this administration. And I think they're trying to use it in a way that is kind of, killing with kindness. And, we will see if any of this thing will, bear fruit in the next few hours or so.
What about pressure from Europe? We got President Macron, who's co-hosting this conference with Saudi, announcing that France will recognize the Palestinian state. How might that shift the dynamic or not?
Okay, so let's start with the positive, okay? So there are attempts now by embarrassed, humiliated, complicit European leaders with genocide the past 22 months to cleanse themselves from the charge. I don't think they're going to be ever cleansed. History does not forgive genociders or enablers of genocide. We know that. But some European leaders are now trying to, take a different path or a separate path. But we also know that they cannot change the situation. As I said earlier, France cannot change the situation in the ground in Gaza. It doesn't have that kind of leverage with Israel. So what is it doing? It's just shifting the conversation to something else. Frankly, it's a positive step. But on the other hand, considering the circumstance in Gaza, the genocide, the starvation, it certainly reminds me of Marie Antoinette. I mean, one has to say it. The infamous line, right? Today, Macron is faced with starvation in Gaza, and he's saying, let them have a state. Marie Antoinette was faced with starving peasant, and she said, let them have cake, let them have brioche. Right? Except that now the French are saying not just let them have a state, and they have to change the curricula. It has to be disarmed, and they have to disarm Hamas, and so on and so forth. I don't think Marie Antoinette asked that much of the French peasants when she offered them cake. Be that as it may, it is a bit of a parody at this point in time. They are trying to recognize a state, which really is meaningless on the ground, as Israel violates every day international law by building more settlements and so on and so forth. And on top of all of that, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are slapping them down, saying all of this is for show. It's meaningless. In fact, it's an obstacle to negotiations for peace. What negotiations for peace? God knows.
Given the wholesale destruction in Gaza and the almost total occupation of the West Bank, you've got to wonder just how much territory would actually be left for any future Palestinian state.
None, not just because there aren't, a few patches of land here and there. There were, at one point, there was talk about, a Swiss federation type of thing between a future Palestine and Israel. But the problem today is that we are left with Swiss cheese. Why do I say Swiss cheese? It's because there are hundreds of Israeli illegal settlements surrounding hundreds of Palestinian communities, and it's impossible to separate Palestinian indigenous from a colonial Israeli settled by force illegally in the West Bank. The maximum distance between any Palestinians and any Israeli today in the occupied territories is no more than 5 miles. Basically, you can no longer separate. Basically, you cannot build a contiguous sovereign Palestinian state. That's passé. And that's why I'm saying, as we have a genocide in Gaza and people are dying every day, to talk about a pipe dream called Palestine that everyone has been talking about, including the Palestinian Liberation Organization that recognized it since 1974. That's 50 years ago we've been talking about two-state solution, but each and every day that solution is being diminished, and yet leaders continue to repeat it as if it is, the mantra for salvation, and the salvation never comes, and Israel continues to eat away on the land, and nobody wants to do anything about it except, repeat more of the same mantras.
Yep. All right, Marwan, we'll leave it there. Thanks for that. Marwan Bishara speaking to us there from Paris, our senior political analyst.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.